He thought no one would ever find out. Dressed in his sharpest navy suit, with his arm around a woman who wasn't his wife, Daniel Whitmore strutted into the grand lobby of the Whitmore Plaza Hotel in New York City, a five-star palace of marble, glass, and gold. The crystal chandeliers sparkled, the piano music floated softly in the air, and Daniel wore the smug smile of a man who believed the world belonged to him. With his platinum card ready in hand, he was prepared for another secret weekend with his mistress. But the moment he stepped up to the reception desk, his world came crashing down. Because across the room, walking with calm confidence and unshakable poise, was the last person he expected to see, his wife, Grace Whitmore. Only this time, she wasn't the fragile, betrayed woman he had left behind. She was the new owner of the very hotel empire he thought he ruled. In that instant, Daniel's carefully constructed facade shattered like glass. Before we dive deeper, think about this. What would you do if the person you betrayed rose above the pain and came back stronger than you ever imagined? That's the story of Daniel and Grace, a story of heartbreak, resilience, and the quiet power of dignity. Daniel Whitmore hadn't always been this way. In his early years, he was the kind of man every woman dreamed of. Ambitious, protective, endlessly romantic. Grace, radiant in her quiet strength, had stood beside him when all he had were dreams in his pocket. Together, they built the life, a family, and eventually a hospitality business that grew into one of the most respected hotel brands in the country. But as Daniel's success grew, so did his appetite for more. Late nights at the office turned into secret meetings. Business trips included unexplained expenses. Grace felt the shift first in his touch. What was once warmth became indifference. Soon the signs were impossible to ignore. The missed anniversaries, the lipstick on his shirts, the lies told with a straight face. Eventually, Daniel fell into the arms of Sabrina Moore, a younger socialite dazzled by Daniel's money but uninterested in his past sacrifices or his marriage. Grace saw it all. She endured the whispers, the humiliation, the loneliness of an empty home. But unlike what Daniel thought, she didn't crumble. She didn't chase him or beg for love. Instead, she quietly built something of her own. Using her intelligence, patience, and quiet determination, she invested in projects under her own name. Piece by piece, she laid the foundation of a new destiny, one Daniel would never see coming. The day Daniel swaggered into his own hotel with Sabrina on his arm, he thought it was business as usual. The lobby smelled of roses, the staff bowed respectfully, and Sabrina clung to him like a trophy. He smirked, believing he still held the world in his hands. But then Grace appeared, dressed in a cream-colored suit that radiated authority. Her eyes locked on him, not with pain, but with power. The receptionist froze, glancing nervously between the husband swiping his card and the wife whose name was now on the ownership papers. The air in the lobby grew tense. Sabrina, still clinging to Daniel, whispered something flirtatious until she noticed the icy silence that had taken over the room. Guests turned to watch. Staff whispered. And then, with every click of her heels echoing against the marble floor, Grace stepped forward. She didn't yell. She didn't create a scene. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was thunder. She stood before Daniel not as the betrayed wife, but as the woman who had risen above betrayal to become her own strength. Daniel's confidence melted. His hand shook as he handed over his card, his voice caught in his throat. He saw in Grace's eyes a reflection of his own choices, the lies, the broken promises, the shallow greed. He wanted to explain, to plead, but no words came. Sabrina shifted uncomfortably, realizing she was standing in the shadow of a woman whose dignity outweighed youth and beauty. Grace didn't need revenge. She chose silence, and sometimes silence speaks louder than words. She turned her gaze away, not to avoid him, but to show that her life no longer revolved around his betrayal. She had carved her own path. The staff looked at her with admiration. Sabrina looked at her with envy. And Daniel looked at her with a sorrow that no apology could ever erase. In the weeks that followed, Daniel wandered his empty penthouse alone, haunted by the memory of her love. The mornings she made him coffee, the nights she waited up while he worked, the unwavering way she believed in his dreams. He finally understood that all the success in the world meant nothing without the loyalty of the person who had stood by him when he had nothing. And he had thrown that away. Meanwhile, Grace flourished. She transformed the Whitmore Plaza Hotel into more than just a place of luxury. Under her leadership, it became a symbol of resilience and new beginnings. Guests spoke of her not only as an owner, but as a woman who embodied strength, elegance, and second chances. Daniel traded gold for glitter, love for lust, substance for shadows. But Grace proved that sometimes the greatest victory isn't revenge, it's rising above with dignity, choosing self-respect over anger, and building a life no betrayal can touch. And as the sunlight poured through the hotel's tall windows, Grace Whitmore stood tall, not as a wife left behind, but as a woman reborn.